So these stories make you realize the impact that you have on somebody else that you know that
Yes,
you're not even aware of every
yes,
single day.
yes.
Did you push record?
Thank you so much for tuning into our second act with Paige and Silka. Today I am so excited to welcome back Kristin Kaufman to our show. Kristin, thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, thank you, Silky. I'm delighted to be here.
Well, Kristin was on a couple years ago. We did three segments. Kristin is the founder of Alignment Inc., which is a company that is dedicated to helping businesses and individuals, align with their goals and values to really discover themselves, right?
Yes, yes, and to reach their potential, both individually and collectively.
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly. So we had some great talks then, and I'm going to link back to those segments. I just watched one in preparation for the interview, and I just remember how much I just enjoy talking with you.
Oh, I feel exactly the same way. Too bad we don't have a bottle of wine in front of us,
Yeah,
girl.
exactly, exactly. Well, one of the reasons that Kristen is back is because she just finished the third in the series of her books, Is This Seat Taken? And I want to talk about in this segment, really let our viewers know about this book and then bring you back and to discuss some of the lessons and how we apply those in life as we reinvent life after 50. So, yeah, Is This Seat Taken? Inspiring life lessons. Kristen, I loved it. Tell me
Oh,
about
thank
how
you.
you wrote this book and how it completes your series.
Yes, it's interesting. Silky, I did not set out to write a trilogy, which is ultimately what this turned into. It really sort of evolved. It came to be, as most things do in life, somewhat incidentally. And this third book actually was my mother's title. I had was struggling with, oh, what am I going to do with my next book? And she said, well, why don't you have it? Is this seat taken? No, I saved it for you. And I said, well, that's a great idea. And it's not just about people, but it's also about experiences and opportunities. So the seat is a metaphor for where we find ourselves. It could be with a person, but it also could be an experience or an opportunity that presents itself.
Yeah. Well, in what your books do, they yeah, first of all, you're just a lovely writer, and you just
Thank
illustrate these stories that we can relate to so well. This book in particular, yeah, your first two were stories about other people. And more external, if you will, experiences that affected you. If I mean, I'm saying that correctly, right?
Yes, yes, they were. They were. The first book was about the incidental encounters, the random encounters that I had when I was traveling the world. And so, yes, they were about people that I randomly found myself engaged with. It could be a bartender at the Admiral's Club in LaGuardia, or it could be a woman that I met on the other side of East Berlin before the wall came down. And then the second book was about people I actually researched. Some people were still alive that I actually had the opportunity to interview, and others were people that were deceased, but they were all about late in life success stories because I was running into people, Silky, that were my age and older that felt like their ship would never come in. And oh my gosh, I'm not finding myself where I really want to be at this stage in my life. And so I decided to research those people and to say that it really is never too late to create the life you want. So that was the second book.
Yeah, which of course is our platform, and that's when you and I
Right.
met. Is after your second
Yes.
book was released, and
Yes.
it is. I mean, that's the one big message that we want to get across is that it is never too late, and
No.
no. And what I love about your books is that I was starting to say it just demonstrates that you capture that
Oh,
really well. And
oh,
what I
yeah.
especially love, and I just finished your book last night,
Oh,
the third one, and again you got me to cry like four different
oh
times.
my gosh. Oh my gosh.
Because there's so much in there that I identify with, as I'm sure our viewers will. Tell us how what stories really affected you. What are your favorite stories?
Yes, well, the stories, I think the one big distinction about this book versus the other two is that these stories are not all what I would call hummingbirds and roses. Some of these stories are really painful stories, and they are stories about, a very terminal, very serious and potentially terminal diagnosis that I received. A story about an abusive relationship that I was in. a story about a job that I had taken and I was intoxicated by the trappings of the job, and I realized 2 weeks into the job that I had made a mistake. And I know some of your listeners are probably going, yes, I've worn those moccasins too. So that's how those stories came to be, is that they are very much autobiographical. And, and I actually was very vulnerable, Silky. I mean, I allowed myself to show in this book the icky bits, as I like to call them, not just the happy times, but really the just gut wrenching hard times that we go through, which, by the way, that's really where we learn the most.
Right.
It's where we learn the most.
Yeah. Well, and that's, I think, what I was trying to say is that it makes us appreciate everything we've gone through.
Yes.
We
No
perhaps
question
reconcile what has happened to us.
Yes. And I think one thing too that I'll just point out, I always struggled, Silky, when you and I talked before. How do you describe the books that you write? I don't really consider them to be self-help books or motivational books. And what I learned through writing this third book is I write storybooks. That's what I write. And I do think that we learn from stories, whether it be our own autobiographical stories or the stories of other people that we read about. So this particular book is another collection of stories, but they're pretty darn vulnerable. Oh my.
Well, it gives us an insight into you, which is, it's always, it's always nice, I think, when somebody puts their life on the table and allows others to engage in that way. And, it's not a book. There's lots of books out there, take you through almost courses, here's how you do this. And they're great. And that, I mean, I've talked to lots of authors who have written those, but again, there's just something about your books that you read the story, you're allowed into somebody's life, and then so many memories come up in your own. This kind of happened to me, and I think that's why I was so engaged and emotional with some of your stories.
Oh, well, I appreciate that. It's funny. Like I said before, I didn't really set out to write what I would call a kind of a sad hardship, Horatio Alger kind of perspective. That's not what I set out to do. But when I started to really think about, to answer your question of what stories did I want to write, the ones that came frontal mind, the frontal lobe, were the ones that were hard.
Mm-hmm.
They were the transformational stories in my life, the ones that were hard, whether it be my mother who just passed away a few months ago and what I learned from her caregivers, whether it be, I lost my father also this year. So it's been a very difficult year for my sister and I to lose both of our parents. So when I was pulling this book together, obviously, how do you sum up a story about your mom and your dad in one chapter? Because this is not a chapter about a book about my parents, but I would have been remiss not to have at least some sort of a head nod to the contribution that they've made in my life. Another book about them will be forthcoming, but that was hard. I'll be honest, it was hard to write those, but they were the most impactful.
Well, and it was very prolific the way that, we don't think about what, or maybe perhaps we know what other people, what kind of impact they've had on us. But what also these stories make you realize the impact that you have on somebody else that
Yes.
that you're not even aware of every single day.
Yes. In fact, there were a couple of stories, I think I even mentioned, people teach without intending to teach. Right? I mean, people are watching us. We don't even know who's watching us, which, by the way, my mom and dad used to say, always be nice because you just never know, and they're right. I mean, I think we're here on the planet, to do one of three things. We're here to learn, we're here to teach, and we're here to serve. And all of that's wrapped up with that wonderful glue called love. And so these stories are definitely about people that were teaching me without knowing they were teaching me.
Yeah.
So I'm really giving them, a voice. I'm giving them homage, if you will.
Yeah, no, big time. And, so if you're like most of us at this time in our lives, where we are sometimes struggling with, where we're headed, we're dealing with mortality, with the fact that, how many more years do we have left and how do we want to live those? I would really encourage you to, pick up the book, see how you relate to this, both men and women. I think it maybe speaks to women a little bit more than men, but some of those stories in there, especially the one about your father in the hospital in Korea, was just gut wrenching. And in a good way.
Right. No, and it's interesting that you should say that, Silky, because I had a pre-release book signing in Dallas on Sunday of last week, and I would say 80% of the people that were there were men, and they loved the book because sometimes men are not given the permission to be emotional.
Yes.
And without exception, they were just like, Kristin, I was reading it on the airplane, and why did you not tell me it was so sad? Because I'm crying in first class. And I said, well, I didn't even know it was that sad, but it did hit a chord. It hit a chord with them.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Oh, and the story about, was it John, the 65-year-old that you hired that
oh,
who then had the
yes.
brain? Oh my gosh, that was just like, great. Well, anyway, I don't want to give it all away.
Yeah. Hey, and that story, oh my, that was a transformative story for me. Yeah. And your readers definitely would relate to that.
Yeah. Well, the point is that it is something for our time in life. I will of course link to the book so our viewers can pick it up. And I want to hold you over. Let's come back and let's talk about some more specifics of what you do with Alignment Inc. and how we transform our life after 50 and align with our true purpose. So see you on the next segment.
Right.
Thanks for watching. If you haven't already done so, please be sure to subscribe to our channel. Buttons right over here. And for more videos on recreating life after 50, please visit our website, secondact.tv. See you soon.